Be sure to give the video a thumbs up, share your insights in the comments, and subscribe to keep up with our newest narratives. Isn't it amusing how a solitary sentence, a mere collection of words spoken by a stranger, can unravel everything you believed to be firm and unchanging? That is precisely what transpired for me, Julia, just last spring. Mark, my husband of 27 years, and I shared what I had always deemed a fulfilling life. Not flawless, I should say. Whose it may be, yet it remains good and comfortable. We had nurtured two remarkable children, Sophie and Ethan, who were now embarking on their own journey through life. Mark held the esteemed position of senior engineer at a manufacturing firm, a role he had diligently occupied for nearly 15 years. My Mark is a creature of routine, consistent and unwavering. At times, I must confess, it may lean towards the realm of the overly predictable. Our home, a charming two-story colonial nestled in a serene Ohio suburb, brimmed with the warm, familiar chaos of cherished memories. The evenings often enveloped us in a comforting cadence. Dinner, a touch of television, him frequently tinkering with some endeavor in the garage, me immersing oneself in a good book or reconnecting with friends in the digital realm. Life unfolded in soft rhythms, and I, for the most part, discovered comfort in its familiar cadence. It was a Tuesday when everything began, a detail etched in my memory, for Mark had his team meetings on that day, returning home with an energy that felt more charged than ever. He muttered discontentedly about the machinations of office politics, lamenting a recent edict from higher-ups that he deemed utterly nonsensical. I found myself only partially engaged, my hands busy slicing vegetables for a stir-fry, the fragrant aroma of ginger and garlic wafting through the air. The kitchen is already brimming. And then he spoke, a heavy sigh escaping him as he loosened his tie. Alex Turner stands there. Believes he possesses all the answers. I inclined my head, offering murmurs of understanding. Alex Turner was a name that lingered in the air, often followed by a weary exhale from Mark. Turner, brimming with youth and ambition, was, as Mark noted, perpetually inclined to alter aspects that seemed perfectly fine as they were. I had never encountered the man, merely sketched an indistinct image of him within the confines of my imagination. Impeccably tailored suit, meticulously styled hair, and a voice that likely carried a touch too far. Merely another workplace drone bringing my husband some frustration. I hardly considered him beyond that point. How could I have anticipated that this Alex Turner, or more precisely, something he uttered, would soon take up such a significant portion of my thoughts? It was not Mark who revealed to me what Turner had expressed. Mark, with all his good intentions, often seeks to protect me from what he deems unnecessary discomfort, particularly when it pertains to himself. No, it originated from Chloe, the spouse of Mark's nearest colleague, Ryan. Chloe and I did not share the bond of best friends, yet we maintained a cordial relationship, occasionally gathering for coffee and sharing Christmas cards. That week, we gathered for our bi-monthly book club meeting at Sarah's inviting home. The conversation surrounding the latest historical novel had waned, and we had transitioned to the more captivating segment of the evening: coffee, cake, and delightful gossip. Chloe leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, her gaze sweeping the room as if searching for hidden eavesdroppers among the chintz armchairs. "Julia," she started, her brow creased with that distinct look individuals adopt when they are on the verge of sharing something they believe is important for you to know, yet are uncertain if you truly wish to hear it. Ryan shared a thought with me. Indeed, there was a remark made by Alex Turner regarding Mark. I'm uncertain whether it's worth bringing up at all. My heart tightened ever so slightly, a feeling that arises when anticipation of unwelcome news looms, yet the specifics remain shrouded in uncertainty. I attempted to maintain a nonchalant demeanor as I reached for my coffee cup. What is the situation with Mark? Chloe toyed with her napkin. It seems that following the acquisition of that significant client, the presentation that Mark's team delivered last week, the very one that had Mark so fraught with stress, Turner engaged in conversation with several of the newcomers in the break room. Unbeknownst to him, Ryan was within earshot. She hesitated, and I found myself holding my breath. He uttered. He remarked that it was unfortunate Mark was so entrenched in his habits, suggesting that a person of his caliber should aspire to greater heights rather than merely drifting toward retirement. And then he added something akin to, "It's as if he simply resigned himself to no longer striving for a genuine impact." The words lingered in the air, hung heavy, thick and oppressive, gliding along. I have relinquished my Mark, the man who once orchestrated our summer road trips with precision, accounting for every last gas stop. A man dedicated countless hours in his workshop, skillfully crafting exquisite wooden toys for our future grandchildren, despite the fact that Sophie and Ethan had yet to tie the knot. The notion was utterly absurd. Yet Chloe appeared so sincere, so troubled. Ryan felt a deep sense of disappointment regarding the situation. She persisted gently. He remarked that Turner possesses a talent for rendering ideas believable, even when they lack truth. One must be aware of polished corporate communication. I mustered a faint smile. Turner certainly presents a complex character, yet beneath the surface, an unsettling feeling had started to fester. It was more than mere anger directed at this Turner individual for speaking ill of my husband. It was truly extraordinary. A glimmer of uncertainty. No doubt about Mark. Precisely. Yet, an unexpected and unwelcome illumination cast upon our cozy existence. Had we grown too complacent? Had Mark, in his subtle and unpretentious manner, begun to take it easy? The notion lingered like a whisper of treachery, yet it existed, a minuscule seed sown by a man I had never encountered. I reassured Chloe, urging her not to fret, for Mark possessed a resilience that was undeniable, while Turner was merely an overly ambitious youth, chasing after his dreams. Yet, the phrase about coasting towards retirement lingered in my thoughts throughout the journey home, persisting as I lay in bed that night, gazing at the ceiling, Mark beside me, breathing softly and unaware. I found myself in a state of conflict. Caught in the tumult of my unwavering allegiance to Mark, I found myself haunted by a sly whisper that questioned, what if there's a sliver of truth in this? What if Mark's happiness was merely a facade? Worse, what if he was, and that itself was the problem? The thought left me feeling more unsettled than I'd been in years. I knew with a certainty that chilled me that I couldn't just let this go. The days that followed were different. Outwardly, nothing had changed. Mark still went to work. I still tended to the house and my garden. We still had our comfortable routines. But for me, a subtle filter had been laid over everything. I found myself watching Mark more closely. Was he really just tired after work, or was it a deeper weariness? When he recounted his day, did his typical grievances about office bureaucracy conceal a true disengagement, a resignation I had overlooked? That phrase, coasting towards retirement, echoed in my thoughts like a dissonant chord in an otherwise familiar melody. It was the part about giving up on making a real mark that struck me hardest, prodding at a tender spot I hadn't even known existed. Mark had always taken pride in his work, in his contributions. He wasn't one for grandstanding, yet he found fulfillment in a job well done, in untangling intricate dilemmas. Had that perception shifted, or had I merely ceased to observe with the same intensity? The disquiet that Chloe's remarks had ignited transformed into a subtle resonance beneath the rhythm of my daily life. I experienced an odd blend of protectiveness for Mark and a growing, unsettling intrigue regarding this Alex Turner. What sort of individual makes such comments about a coworker? Was it spiteful, a deliberate attempt to destabilize Mark? Or was it, as Chloe subtly suggested, an observation that, despite its awkward delivery, emerged from a distinct generational viewpoint on the themes of career and ambition? I contemplated discussing it with Mark, naturally. Countless times, I found myself on the verge of speaking, poised to share Chloe's narrative and discern his response. Yet, I always faltered. He had been under considerable strain lately with that new project, and I was reluctant to impose another weight upon him. What if he dismissed it entirely? Or, even more troubling, what if it struck a chord, revealing a hidden anxiety he had yet to confide in me? The prospect of inflicting further pain upon him or suggesting that I doubted him rendered me mute. Yet, that silence bore a weight of its own. It felt as though I was not merely withholding words from him, but also from the very essence of our relationship. My once beloved pastimes lost their allure. The characters in my novels appeared insignificant, and the vivid hues of my floral arrangements seemed to fade. My thoughts wandered, endlessly replaying Turner's reported words, dissecting their meaning, striving to grasp the intent behind them. I even, though it brings me a touch of embarrassment, attempted to search for Alex Turner online. I found little to grasp onto. A scant LinkedIn profile merely affirmed his position at Mark's company. The photograph depicted a man younger than I had envisioned, perhaps in his late 30s, sporting a confident, almost cocky smile. He didn't resemble a monster. Rather, he embodied the essence of a modern professional. One could easily imagine him tossing around terms like synergy and disruption, devoid of any irony. Yet, seeing his face only intensified my unease, rendering Mark's alleged critique more tangible, less easily dismissed as mere office gossip. I found myself pondering the intricacies of his existence, the driving forces behind his actions. Was he merely driven by ambition, or did a deeper essence reside within him? And why, oh why, did I find myself so invested in the thoughts of this unfamiliar figure? My concern lay with Mark, his happiness, his sense of fulfillment. Yet, this Turner character had inexplicably emerged as a crucial piece in unraveling that enigma. An undeniable pull tugged at me, a near magnetic urge to comprehend the man whose thoughtless words had so profoundly disrupted the tranquil currents of my life. This sensation of being caught in a web, an unwitting investigator in the labyrinth of my own marriage, was unfamiliar and profoundly disconcerting. I understood that remaining in this state of uncertainty was untenable. I had to take action to seek some semblance of clarity. But how? Directly confronting Turner felt out of the question, too theatrical, too intrusive. Approaching Mark was still a step I wasn't prepared to take. The revelation, when it finally emerged, was unexpected, surfacing through an ordinary company email Mark had left open on his study computer. It was an invitation to a company barbecue, a delightful gathering designed to honor the successful culmination of a significant project, and among those who had confirmed their attendance was Alex Turner. My heart fluttered with excitement. Here lay an opportunity to encounter the man himself, to witness him firsthand, perhaps even engage with him in a relaxed atmosphere. It felt somewhat akin to entering the lion's den, yet the allure of transforming a mere image into a tangible presence, to confront the unsettling words with a real person, was simply too enticing to resist. I informed Mark that I'd join, with excitement and apprehension. He appeared taken aback yet delighted by my decision. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping into uncharted territory. The day of the company barbecue dawned bright and sunny, a quintessential late spring Saturday that filled the air with a sense of endless possibility. Mark was in an unexpectedly buoyant spirit, whistling cheerfully as he filled a cooler with refreshments. His genuine pleasure at my presence was palpable. It had been years since I had joined him at one of these gatherings, as I typically favored the solace of a quiet weekend at home, yet my own emotions were a tangled web of anticipation and uncertainty. The atmosphere, his excitement palpable as he mingled with colleagues. I stood at the edge of the gathering, a mix of nerves and curiosity swirling within me. The sun cast a warm glow over the scene, illuminating the laughter and chatter that floated through the air. I adjusted my sunglasses, taking a moment to observe the families enjoying their day, the carefree spirit of the picnic enveloping me. It was a simple outing, yet I felt the weight of my own expectations, as if I were stepping into a world where every interaction mattered. Mark's laughter echoed, drawing me back to the present, and I took a deep breath, ready to embrace the day ahead. He was deep in conversation with a few of his colleagues, giving me a gentle pat on the shoulder before drifting towards a cluster gathered around a smoky grill. "Mingle a bit, honey," he had said. "I'll grab us some food." Left to my own devices, I surveyed the crowd, my gaze seeking one specific face. It didn't take long to find him. Alex Turner stood near a volleyball net, laughing effortlessly with a group of younger employees. He was taller than I had anticipated from his photo, clad in well-fitting jeans and the right approach. He wore a casual shirt, exuding the vibe of someone relishing a day out with friends rather than a corporate shark. There was an effortless confidence in his demeanor, a way of carrying himself that naturally attracted others. I found myself watching him for a while, attempting to reconcile this image with the man who, as Chloe had mentioned, had so dismissively critiqued my husband. He didn't appear arrogant, precisely, but there was a certain intensity in his gaze when he spoke, a focused energy that was unmistakable, even from afar. I took a deep breath and resolved that mere observation wouldn't suffice. I had had enough. I needed to grasp the situation, even if only slightly. I approached the drinks table, pretending to be intrigued by the assortment of sodas and iced tea, subtly maneuvering myself nearer to his group. It was an awkward attempt, I admit, but uncertainty clouded my judgment. As fortune, or perhaps destiny, would have it, Alex Turner himself detached from his circle and made his way to the same table, likely in search of a refill. A warm smile adorned his face, a striking contrast to the antagonist I had half anticipated. He nodded courteously as he reached for a cup. "Enjoying the party?" he asked, his voice warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the sharp tone I had anticipated. This was my moment, however fleeting. "Yes, it's a lovely day for it," I replied, striving to maintain my composure. "I'm Julia, by the way, Mark Miller's wife." His eyes brightened with a spark of recognition, perhaps surprise. "Oh, Mark's wife. It's wonderful to finally meet you," he said, extending his hand. "Alex Turner. I collaborate with Mark quite often." His handshake was firm, exuding confidence. There was nothing overtly offensive about him, nothing that suggested treachery. He appeared personable, even, dare I say, likable. This was not what I had steeled myself for. "Mark mentions you," I said, attempting to maintain a neutral tone. He chuckled, a surprisingly warm sound. "I hope it's not all complaints about the demanding younger generation," he added with a self-deprecating smile. "We do have different approaches at times, but I hold a tremendous amount of respect for Mark. His experience is invaluable." This was the moment, the opening, but the words lodged in my throat. How could I broach such an uncomfortable, accusatory topic at a family barbecue with his warm gaze fixed on me? Instead, I found myself saying, "He's very dedicated." Alex nodded, his demeanor shifting to something more solemn. "He absolutely is." In fact, he hesitated, scanning the surroundings as if to ensure our conversation remained private despite the open space. He leaned in slightly. "Can I be candid, Julia? Since you're Mark's wife, perhaps you'd comprehend. I sometimes worry that Mark, well, that he doesn't receive the recognition he truly deserves around here. He's got so much more to offer." My mind reeled. This was so different from the dismissive, coasting comment Chloe had relayed. This sounded like concern, admiration even. Could Chloe have misunderstood, or had Ryan misheard, or was Turner just incredibly skilled at saying the right thing to the right person? The discrepancy was jarring. He continued, his voice earnest. "He's a brilliant engineer, one of the best. But the company, well, it sometimes overlooks the quiet contributors, the individual who shun the spotlight." Yet here he was, locking eyes with me. I had been actively seeking methods to showcase his contributions, ensuring that management recognized the breadth of his expertise. I found myself at a loss for words. This man, whom I had perceived as the root of my discomfort, was now presenting himself as Mark's champion. The very foundation beneath me seemed to tremble. The quiet strain I had been harboring for weeks intensified, now tangled with a deep sense of bewilderment. Was Alex Turner truly a Machiavellian manipulator or a genuinely well-intentioned colleague? What implications did this hold for Mark and my comprehension of his professional life? The once casual, sunny atmosphere of the barbecue now buzzed with an enigmatic tension I struggled to interpret. My original intent to merely observe had evolved into a far more intricate dilemma. I found myself more conflicted than ever. Yet, the struggle was no longer solely about the spoken words. It revolved around the true nature of Alex Turner and the deeper significance of his unexpected remarks. My conversation with Alex Turner at the barbecue lingered in my thoughts for days. His words, so distinct from Chloe's account, had utterly unsettled me. He possesses so much more to offer. I've been searching for ways to emphasize his contributions. These were not the sentiments of someone who believed Mark was merely coasting or had surrendered. It was quite the contrary. Could Chloe have misinterpreted things so drastically? Or Ryan? It seemed improbable that they would deliberately mislead me. Perhaps the initial remark had been uttered, yet the essence, the subtlety had vanished in the process. Or perhaps, and this notion was more disquieting, Turner possessed a remarkable talent for adapting his message to suit various listeners. The uncertainty stirred a tumult within me. I found myself swaying between doubt and a cautious optimism that perhaps my worries were unfounded. Perhaps Mark was not being unjustly overlooked in his professional realm. Perhaps someone truly recognized his value, even if Mark himself lacked the confidence to reveal it. I resolved that I could not simply let it lie. The gap was too vast, the consequences too profound. I craved further insight, yet I hesitated to bring Mark into the fray. He appeared more content since the barbecue, a newfound ease about him. The endeavor he had been immersed in had proven fruitful, and he had even shared, with a hint of astonishment, that Alex Turner had lauded his contributions during a team gathering. Young Turner can be overwhelming at times. Mark had laughed about it over dinner one evening, but he is astute. I will grant him that. He truly had some commendable insights regarding my designs for the new component. It took me by surprise. This only deepened my confusion. Was Turner sincerely attempting to back Mark? If that were the case, what had prompted that initial disparaging remark? I felt as though I was wandering through a labyrinth without a guide. My chance for greater understanding arrived unexpectedly. About a week after the barbecue, I found myself sharing coffee with Chloe. I had been contemplating whether to mention my interaction with Turner, unsure of her own response, yet she broached the subject first. Stirring her latte with an exaggerated flourish, she asked, "Did you happen to see Alex Turner at the barbecue? Ryan was keeping a watchful eye on him. Still thinks he's a bit of a snake in the grass." I took a measured sip of my own coffee. "Actually, Chloe, I spoke to him." Her eyebrows arched in surprise. "You did? What did he say? Was he insufferable?" I paused, weighing my words, then chose to be forthright. Honestly, he was perfectly pleasant, and he shared some very positive contributions and experiences surrounding Mark. He even expressed that Mark warranted greater acknowledgement. Chloe fixed her gaze on me, the sound of her spoon tapping against her cup echoing in the silence. "Well, she said slowly. "That's not what Ryan heard him saying that day in the break room." "Not at all. Are you sure about what Ryan heard?" I inquired gently. "I mean, could there have been a misunderstanding?" Chloe frowned, lost in thought. Ryan was pretty clear. Turner was definitely talking about Mark coasting and being set in his ways. He felt a surge of indignation on Mark's behalf, yet she hesitated. Ryan had also remarked on Turner's remarkable ambition. Perhaps he had come to understand that disparaging a senior colleague was unwise and was now attempting to mend fences. Or perhaps he was engaged in some intricate political maneuvering. Her words rekindled a tide of my earlier doubts. The notion of political gamesmanship seemed credible in a corporate setting, yet there had been an unmistakable sincerity in Turner's voice when he addressed me, a true earnestness reflected in his eyes. Or was I merely in my naivety, I found myself too eager to embrace the brighter side of things, for the alternative was simply too disheartening to bear. As I left my coffee with Chloe, a deeper conflict stirred within me. It appeared there were two distinct personas of Alex Turner, one who whispered criticisms of Mark in hushed tones and another who extolled his virtues to his wife and, it seemed, in team meetings as well. How could both versions coexist? I came to the realization that to unravel this mystery, I must delve into the essence of Alex Turner, his motivations, his viewpoint. And perhaps, just perhaps, I also needed to gain insight into Mark's work life from a perspective I had never contemplated before. The notion of intentionally pursuing Turner struck me as bold, perhaps even a touch reckless. What right did I have to involve myself in this? Yet, the urge to untangle this mystery, both for Mark's benefit and my own tranquility, was growing insistent. I couldn't shake off his words, "Since you're Mark's wife, perhaps you'd understand." It felt as though he had cracked open a door, if only a fraction. The next week, I found myself wandering through downtown Cleveland for an art exhibit. My heart raced with anticipation as I neared the exhibit I had longed to see. Mark's office building loomed just a few blocks ahead. On a whim, one that quickened my pulse, I chose to stroll past. The lunchtime crowd bustled along the sidewalks, a tapestry of movement and chatter. As I drew closer to the sleek, modern skyscraper housing Mark's workplace, I spotted a familiar figure stepping out from the revolving doors, animatedly conversing on his phone. It was Alex Turner, alone and unguarded. This was the moment I had been waiting for, a serendipitous encounter, unplanned and free from the forced cheer of a company picnic. My thoughts surged like a tempest. Should I take that step toward him? What words would even escape my lips? Just as I began to spiral into doubt, he concluded his call and lifted his gaze, our eyes locking for a fleeting moment. A spark of familiarity ignited in his expression. He smiled. "Julia, isn't it? Mark Miller's spouse. Fancy meeting you here." It was now or never. "Alex, hello," I said, striving for a nonchalant tone, as if encountering him in the heart of the city was the most ordinary occurrence imaginable. I had just visited the art museum. "Oh, the Impressionist exhibit. I've been meaning to check that out," he responded effortlessly. An awkward pause lingered in the air for a moment. I inhaled deeply. "Actually, Alex," I began, my voice trembling slightly despite my determination. "I was hoping to discuss Mark and your comments at the barbecue, as well as some other things I had heard." His smile remained intact, yet his eyes glinted with newfound focus. He checked his watch. "I was just about to grab a quick lunch. There's a nice cafe around the corner. Would you like to join me? We could talk there." It was an unmistakable invitation, a readiness to connect that caught me off guard. A part of me yearned to withdraw, to whisper an excuse and slip away. Yet, a more compelling part, the one craving clarity, acquiesced. "I would appreciate that. Thank you." As we strolled the brief distance to the cafe, a sleek, modern establishment adorned with minimalist aesthetics, an odd sense of unreality washed over me. Here I was, poised to share a meal with my husband's colleague, a man who could be either a genuine ally or a cunning manipulator, all sparked by a handful of disquieting remarks. The subtle tension, the weight I had been carrying for weeks now felt like a tight coil in my chest. As we settled at a small table by the window, with sandwiches and iced teas on the way, Alex turned to me with an expectant gaze. "So, Julia," he began, his tone open and inviting. "You mentioned some things you heard and what I said at the barbecue. I sense there's some confusion, and I'd be happy to clarify anything I can." His straightforwardness caught me off guard, prompting me to respond in kind. "Alex," I began, choosing my words with care. "I appreciate your honesty at the barbecue. You spoke very highly of Mark, yet I had also heard indirectly that you had previously made some less favorable remarks about him, particularly regarding his tendency to coast and his resistance to change." He remained unfazed, listening intently, his gaze unwavering. When I concluded, he nodded slowly. "Thank you for being candid, Julia. Your acknowledgement means a great deal to me. I understand how that could indeed be perplexing and worrisome for you. He took a moment, collecting his thoughts. It is indeed, he remarked, his tone deepening, taking on a more earnest quality. Some time ago, in a fit of exasperation, I expressed sentiments akin to that to a few of the younger team members. Following a notably arduous project meeting, Mark had shown reluctance towards the new methodologies we were attempting to adopt. It was a lapse in judgment on my part to express my frustrations in such a manner, particularly in a setting where they could be overheard and misconstrued, and for that I sincerely apologize. It was never intended as a personal affront to Mark. Rather, it was more of a reflection on the hurdles that arise when attempting to implement change in a large organization, noting how entrenched expertise can occasionally hinder innovation if we are not vigilant. His confession, strikingly candid and unrepentant, took me by surprise. I anticipated denial, deflection, or perhaps a dose of corporate jargon. Rather, he embraced it. Yet he pressed on, inclining his body just a touch, his demeanor sincere. The remark was not born from any intention to disrespect Mark. In reality, it is rather the contrary. It emerged from a conviction in his own abilities, significantly more. His talent reveals an astonishing depth of knowledge. Indeed, there are moments of frustration as I perceive that the system, the prevailing company culture, and even his own humility seem to hinder him from achieving the greater impact he is truly capable of. The remark about coasting was an awkward and poorly selected means of conveying that frustration. It wasn't a matter of him surrendering. Rather, it was my yearning to witness him set free, I suppose. He gazed at me, his eyes probing into the depths of mine. When I conversed with you at the barbecue, that was the honest reality. Mark has my admiration. I truly believe he merits greater recognition, and I have been making efforts in my own capacity to champion his talents, ensuring that they are acknowledged and appreciated by those in positions of authority. It is possible that my approaches may occasionally lack sophistication. I continue to explore the intricate dynamics of personalities and the political landscape within an organization of this magnitude. I lingered in contemplation, absorbing the weight of his words. The weight of it all was overwhelming. His explanation resonated with a sense of believability. It crafted an image not of malevolence, but of youthful eagerness, aspiration, and perhaps a sincere, albeit clumsily voiced apprehension regarding Mark's possibilities. While it did not absolve the initial remark, it offered a new perspective on it. Alex Turner emerged as a character of remarkable complexity, far beyond what I had initially envisioned. Neither a villain nor a hero, but rather a complex human being shaped by his own unique perspectives and imperfections. Thus, the remarks he made in the break room, I articulated with deliberate slowness. You didn't perceive Mark as lazy or lacking in competence. Good heavens, no. Alex exclaimed, his expression one of genuine astonishment. Most certainly not. Mark stands out as one of the dwindling few, a genuinely talented professional who comprehends concepts from the foundational level. My frustration stemmed from the sense that he was occasionally satisfied to let his brilliance flicker solely within the confines of his own cubicle, when it had the potential to illuminate the entire department or even the company at large. I wish for him to be recognized as the leader he inherently is, rather than merely the dependable senior figure. An overwhelming surge of feeling enveloped me. It was a sense of relief, partly because the notion of Mark being quietly demeaned might not hold true, but it was also something deeper, a realization beginning to unfold, an awareness of the intricacies of Mark's professional realm. A realm I had merely observed from a distance, along with an unforeseen, startling compassion for Alex Turner. He was more than merely a sharp suit or a corporate shark. He was youthful, ambitious, and perhaps recognized in Mark a promise that even Mark himself, or I, had begun to neglect amidst the ease of our daily routines. After that, the conversation unfolded with greater ease. We discussed the hurdles faced within the industry, the varying work styles across generations, and his personal ambitions for the future. He articulated his thoughts with fervor and an unexpected depth of understanding. I discovered a new way of hearing, truly hearing, not as Mark's protective spouse, but as one mature individual connecting with another. A delicate change enveloped the space between us, a gradual lowering of defenses. The weight I had borne for what felt like an eternity started to lift, giving way to a fragile sense of connection and understanding that surpassed my earlier doubts. This lunch, steeped in suspicion and anxiety, was evolving into something entirely different, completely, a surprising instance of insight and maybe the onset of a deeply personal revelation. The road before me remained shrouded in ambiguity, yet for the first time in weeks, a spark of hope ignited within me, a whisper that perhaps this bewildering chapter could unfold into something uplifting after all. As our lunch with Alex Turner came to an end, I sensed a deep transformation stirring within me. The figure I had envisioned as a possible adversary now appeared to be an unexpected catalyst, an individual whose deeds, though initially disconcerting, were urging a reconsideration I had not recognized was necessary. He had not merely provided an explanation. He had presented a fresh viewpoint on Mark, on his endeavors, and even, in a roundabout way, on our shared existence. "Thank you, Alex," I remarked while we lingered for the check. "I appreciate your honesty. It has provided me with much to ponder." He smiled, a sincere, warm smile that illuminated his eyes. "The pleasure was entirely mine, Julia. Should you ever have any concerns, or if you believe I could assist Mark in any manner, please do not hesitate to reach out." Sometimes an outside perspective, even a slightly meddling one like mine, he added with a self-deprecating chuckle, can be useful. He paid for our lunch despite my protests, and as we stood outside the cafe, ready to part ways, he paused. "You know, Julia," he said, his tone thoughtful, "Mark is fortunate to have someone like you looking out for him, someone who cares enough to seek out answers. Not everyone has that." His words were simple, but they resonated deeply. It was a moment of unexpected connection, a recognition of shared care for Mark, albeit from very different standpoints. It wasn't romantic, not in the slightest, but it was deeply emotional, a sense of two people understanding each other on a level that transcended workplace dynamics or social pleasantries. It was based on mutual respect, a respect that had grown in the space of a single honest conversation. Walking away from the cafe, my mind was buzzing. The city streets, which had seemed so ordinary just an hour before, now felt vibrant, teeming with fresh opportunities. Alex's clarification regarding his remark, his exasperation with Mark for not aspiring to greater heights, stemmed not from a belief in Mark's inadequacy, but rather from the recognition of his remarkable capabilities. It was a revelation. Far from being an affront, it emerged, in its own awkward manner, as a form of praise. It implied that Mark was not perceived as diminishing, but rather as a significant contributor whose true potential might be overlooked, or who was perhaps too humble to advocate for himself. This crafted a vivid image of Mark's professional landscape that was far more intricate than his typical complaints about bureaucracy had ever suggested. I came to recognize how much I had overlooked in Mark's career, how little I genuinely grasped the daily pressures, the aspirations, the complex interpersonal dynamics he maneuvered. I had perceived him as steadfast Mark, the dependable provider, and in that perception, I may have unwittingly bolstered the very complacency that Turner had initially, and I now realized, mistakenly, seemed to attribute to him. The experience transformed me in ways I had not anticipated. The initial sensation of being torn had evolved into a profound clarity, accompanied by a powerful sense of purpose. I was no longer a mere spectator in Mark's life or a target of office whispers. Instead, I felt a surge of empowerment, a newfound enlightenment. This was my personal revelation. The very experiences that jolt us from our comfort zones can serve not as threats, but as gateways to growth and deeper understanding. That evening, I regarded Mark with fresh perspective. He sat in his armchair, engrossed in the newspaper, embodying contentment. Yet now I perceived more than in the stillness of the moment. I beheld the remarkable engineer Alex Turner, a figure brimming with experience and untapped potential. A wave of affection and admiration washed over me, intertwined with a quiet determination to become a more engaged supporter of his passions, rather than merely his comfort. I chose not to share the details of my lunch with Mark right away. It was a revelation I needed to digest, to grasp its significance for myself, for him, for our relationship. You won't believe what transpired. This tale is not merely an understated yet significant revelation. It revolves around the ripple effects of a seemingly innocuous piece of negative gossip, which unexpectedly forged a bond with someone I once viewed as an adversary. This connection illuminated the quiet ways we often confine ourselves and those we cherish by adhering to familiar stories. As a result, I began to perceive my husband and our marriage through a renewed lens. I came to understand that my yearning for Mark's ease and happiness might have unintentionally suppressed a facet of himself that still craved challenge, recognition, and the opportunity to leave the significant imprint Turner had alluded to. In the weeks that followed, I started to subtly prompt Mark to delve deeper into discussions about his work, not merely the frustrations, but also the elements that sparked his interest and the ideas he envisioned. I became a more attentive listener, posing more inquiries. I proposed that he think about mentoring some of the younger engineers, a notion he had fleetingly expressed interest in years prior, but had never acted upon. To my astonishment, he was receptive. It was as if a dormant part of him was reawakening. He began discussing a new project initiative, a spark igniting in his eye that I hadn't witnessed in years. He even mentioned with a wry smile that Turner had been unexpectedly supportive of some of his more innovative ideas. It turns out he's not just a slick talker, Mark confessed one evening. He genuinely knows his stuff, and he's advocating for changes that, well, might actually be beneficial. I never shared with Mark the complete story of Chloe's issue, a caution, or the intensity of my early fears. There were aspects I chose to keep as part of my personal exploration, yet I eventually brought up, almost nonchalantly, that I had encountered Alex Turner downtown and shared a brief, enjoyable conversation. Mark merely nodded, acknowledging it without much interest, already absorbed in a fresh design challenge he was outlining on a notepad. And that was perfectly fine. The true transformation lay not in a grand disclosure to Mark, but within myself. My exchange with Alex Turner, stemming from a miscommunication and a yearning to safeguard my husband, had inadvertently forged an unexpected alliance. It illuminated the significance of pursuing understanding prior to casting judgment, revealing the intricate humanity that resides even in those we instinctively oppose. It revealed that drifting through life isn't solely a sign of ambition's absence, but can also stem from a dearth of opportunity or support. Moreover, it demonstrated that emotional bonds and mutual respect can flourish in the most surprising of circumstances, even between a devoted wife and her husband's driven younger counterpart, colleague. My world didn't dramatically explode, but it subtly, meaningfully expanded. I learned that sometimes what seems like a betrayal or a criticism from the outside can actually be a mirror reflecting back not just on the person being discussed, but on ourselves and the roles we play in each other's lives. The reflection I saw wasn't entirely comfortable, but it spurred a growth in me, and I believe a renewed vibrancy in Mark that I wouldn't trade for anything. And that, I think, is something worth sharing.